Hey guys, welcome to Grounded with Jon Tester and Maritza Giorgio. And look who's with us. We have Miles Taylor joining us here, back with us, of course, a national security expert who actually worked as chief of staff for the Department of Homeland Security. So Miles, under the first Trump administration, we have a lot to talk to you about, obviously, with what's been happening this week.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's been a dramatic week that just keeps getting more dramatic. I'm sure that you all have seen the latest footage that was leaked of the attack in Minnesota, but it certainly casts doubt on the administration's narrative at best and deflates the lie at worst.
Yeah, we're going to talk all about it. We had this really informative show. Hi. Senator Tester is here with
me. That's good. And Miles,
I was going to say, who's the chaperone you brought to the party? Who is this guy?
Exactly right. She found me wandering the streets of Missoula and brought me in. But is it true that you came miles and miles to be on our show? Is that true?
Oh man, I was just over the PTSD of the kids mocking me for my name in preschool. You've just ripped those scabs right back off.
Well, you'd be amazed the names that they came up for me, not in preschool, but in the U.S. Senate, come off of Tester. But you can just guess.
Oh wait, no.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I'm not going to say them. Are you kidding me?
Well, my nickname is Maritza Pizza.
Well,
rhymes with pizza. That's always been my
There's
nickname.
Nothing obscene with pizza, okay?
Well, I could have had bad acne, so that's not true, but nothing obscene. Okay, so Miles, we want to thank you so much for joining us. I titled this, What a Year This Week Has Been, because really, I mean, it's January 9th, and if you think about Saturday, we did a kind of a surprise episode Saturday about Venezuela. That wasn't even a week ago. And then we talk about what's happening in Minneapolis. So we had this informative show yesterday with Senator Tina Smith, who joined us. We thank her. And we want to just kind of go over some more stuff with you, Miles. So let's start with ICE. And if there's anything you want to chat about, just jump on in. We're just so thankful you're here with us. So let's just talk about more ICE raids nationwide. We saw in Portland, Oregon, reports of 2 others hospitalized after allegedly being shot by a Border Patrol agent. The mayor there calling for ICE to stop operations as they investigate. And then I want to play this video for you because we saw protests in Minneapolis overnight that really, it just shows how massive. So we saw that happening. I saw protests all over the country. What's your kind of take about this fight back that we're seeing, Miles?
Well, I think we're just seeing the beginning of it, Maritza. I mean, this weekend, we are going to see massive protests nationwide. The organizing group Indivisible has announced that they're going to do protests in hundreds of cities across America, a lot of those scheduled for Saturday, local time around lunchtime in a lot of different places. And I think we'll get the full scope of it after this weekend, the anger around the country. But a lot of people who've only protested one time in their lives, October 18th of last year for No King's Day, are people who are going to be out again. So I think you're going to see considerable numbers out there on the streets. But look, I'll say this, you mentioned the news out of Portland and the shootings there. I was saying earlier this week after the Minnesota shooting happened, get ready for more because this will be systematized because the underlying factors that led to this are systemic. You talk about an agency that's become the largest federal law enforcement agency in America, that's lowered recruiting standards, that's lowered training standards, and that is deliberately targeting people for recruitment based on ideology. They're targeting people with messages about cleansing the homeland. They're going after MAGA subsets. And so you've got an agency that's now fielding undertrained, underqualified, and ideologically motivated people to roam America's city streets with loaded weapons. Then layer on top of that the President of the United States has rhetorically, at least, given them a license to kill. It's not an exaggeration. You go back to last July when protesters were caught vandalizing ICE vehicles. the president lost his mind. He spiraled. He started to write on Truth Social about how these brand new vehicles he had given ICE had been defaced, and that he was directing the Secretary of Homeland Security to give, quote, total authorization to use whatever means necessary against these thugs. If you are an ICE agent out on the street, the message has been loud and clear from this administration. I can do whatever I want. And this week, they heard the vice president of the United States say they had absolute immunity. This is a noxious cocktail for acts of violence. You're bringing in people who are already trigger happy and undertrained, and you're telling them, do whatever you want. We've got your backs. Of course, it was going to happen. But the bigger picture is it's going to keep happening until there is some kind of check on ICE's power or on the president.
Exactly right. And that check is not going to come from the administration, as you've seen. The check needs to come from Congress. Have you heard anybody on the Republican side talk about these shootings?
No, but what I will say, because, you know, I'm often, like you, very pessimistic and cynical about the degree of courage on my former side of the aisle from Republicans. However, this week, I will say, there were a couple of tiny points of light. I mean, we had the Senate vote to restrict the president's authority on Venezuela, or take an initial procedural step to hemming Donald Trump in on Venezuela, which I'm sure we'll talk about. And then also on the House side, Republicans defect to restore healthcare benefits and healthcare subsidies. Those are two quite potent defections. Now, is it the whole Republican caucus? No, but we're talking about enough members who are showing that they're willing to stand up to the White House. That doesn't necessarily translate into the sweeping action we need to constrain ICE from killing American citizens, but it does show that there is a caucus of sensible conservatives, even a tiny one that still exists, that might be appealed to add those restrictions.
I need to fix your microphone.
What happened?
You were covering it. There. All right.
Is it better now?
I think so, hopefully.
So it was yesterday or the day before? Was it yesterday that the lady
shooting?
got shot?
2 days ago.
2 days ago. And we have seen, it's interesting. We saw the Secretary of the DHS stand up and say, this is what happened, and didn't have a clue what the hell she was talking about. And then we saw the president say this is what happened and didn't know what he was talking about. And then we saw the mayor and the governor, mayor of Minneapolis and the governor of Minnesota, after they saw the video, stand up and say, this is unacceptable because this is what happened. And I can tell you there was one network that I was watching that said, well, these guys have jumped to conclusions. It's really, really unfortunate that the mayor and the governor jumped to conclusions on what transpired with this domestic terrorist, for Christ's sakes. I just drove through Lincoln, Montana, by the way.
Right.
That's where a domestic terrorist used to live. And it's called the Unabomber. But the bottom line is that does this mean we just end up with U.S. citizens getting shot whenever ICE feels like this is the right thing to do? Or
well, look, I can tell you.
Is somebody that has a level of common sense going to stand up? And we had Tina Smith on the show yesterday, and Tina said the same thing I said. I've worked with these people. I respect these people, but damn, it's hard to keep the respect if they're going to continue not to have any backbone whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, look, I couldn't agree more with that. I mean, I would say that if I was still at the department, if I was still at DHS, my perspective right now, if I was sitting in a private room having a conversation with the secretary before she went out there publicly, I would have said, Madam Secretary, we had an ICE officer, shots fired against a U.S. citizen. It's incumbent on us not to fire more shots. In other words, we can't go out there and rhetorically inflame the situation because we're talking about a public safety powder keg. That's what happens after these incidents. That's what we saw in 2020 with the racial justice protests, is the need for caution in the language we use, because you could easily, in a moment like that, incite the public, and that creates a volley of violence on both sides. You don't want to get into that situation. That is priority number one if you are leading one of those agencies. We saw the Secretary of Homeland Security clearly didn't get that advice behind the scenes, or if she did, wasn't following it, because she went out there while the victim, I assume, was still in the hospital trying to be resuscitated and said this was an act of domestic terrorism. That's the sort of inflammatory language that leads a situation like this to spiral. And then, of course, the president echoed that language even once the first person videos came out that fully disproved that narrative. We see an administration double down on claiming that this was an act of domestic terrorism. And I want to be clear about this because I've responded to terrorist attacks over the past 20 years, dozens of them in the United States, in the United Kingdom, in North Africa. And I can tell you unequivocally, nothing about this looked like a terrorist attack to me. A mother of 3 in a Honda with stuffed animals in the glove compartment was attempting to follow an officer's orders and leave the scene, and she was shot in the head. Terrorism, by definition, is intentional violence meant to intimidate or coerce a civilian population. I don't know how the description I just gave could convince anyone that the woman in that car was attempting to intimidate the people of the United States writ large. That's obviously folly, but using that language has already brainwashed millions of people into thinking it's true and could be the justification for further acts of state repression. That is deeply irresponsible in my view.
Even though the officer that supposedly got hit walked over to the floor, the car walked over to the car, which was probably 150 feet away, and I think confirmed that the person was dead or dying and then walked back. That person supposedly went to the hospital for an injury.
Yeah.
I want to play, there's a lot here that we could pull on there, Miles, when you talk about terrorists. And Steve Schmidt put out a really smart video, we thought, and I have it, but he basically says, Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, that's a domestic terrorist. Timothy McVeigh, that's a domestic terrorist. He goes down the list. But let's just play what the vice president said yesterday in the White House press briefing.
Walking out here, somebody sent me a photo of a CNN headline about what happened in Minneapolis. And this is the headline. I'm just going to read it. Outrage after ICE officer kills U.S. citizen in Minneapolis. Well, that's one way to put it, and that is the way that many people in the corporate media have put this attack over the last 24 hours. And I say attack very, very intentionally because this was an attack on federal law enforcement. This was an attack on law and order. This was an attack on the American people. The way that the media, by and large, has reported this story has been an absolute disgrace, and it puts our law enforcement officers at risk every single day. What that headline leaves out is the fact that that very ICE officer nearly had his life ended, dragged by a car 6 months ago, 33 stitches in his leg. So you think maybe he's a little bit sensitive about somebody ramming him with an automobile? What that headline leaves out is that that woman was there to interfere with a legitimate law enforcement operation in the United States of America. What that headline leaves out.
Okay, so we're going to cut him off there. I have a couple thoughts about that. The first is, I am not an expert in law enforcement. But I know that law enforcement officers have been pulled off duty because they might still have PTSD or be recovering from some kind of injury they received on the job. So if this officer, if this ICE agent has some kind of trauma around vehicles, why is he out on the streets of Minneapolis?
And why is he walking in front of a vehicle? By the way, I don't believe he was hit at all. I think he was unscathed in this whole thing. That's my opinion. But why, as an officer that's been hit, supposedly, walk in front of a vehicle?
But the second thing with that, and he railed on the press for the wrong headlines. I mean, the videos are there. And that's kind of this whole point, right? Is that I know your organization, Miles with Defiance, that you have been instrumental in getting these whistles out to these communities that they're using to alert neighbors when there's ICE activity. And go check that out on Miles's website because you can help with that effort. But also, he rails on the press for reporting what we see in the video, for reporting what is being seen in the video.
Don't believe those lying eyes.
That's right. So I mean,
well, I mean, he said in there, he read the CNN headline, the core of which was ICE officer kills American citizen. What about that is under dispute? What did the vice president disprove? An ICE officer did indeed kill an American citizen. She didn't kill herself. She wasn't killed by an FBI agent. She was killed by an ICE officer. Did outrage grow? Yes. Turn on the news, open social media. People are outraged. It was sort of an absurd point he was trying to prove, but I was actually more struck by him saying that we should give some credence to this officer because he's a little sensitive, because he'd been hit before. Well, look, I have had MAGA supporters threaten me with death to the point that I had to have an armed security detail for months. That doesn't give me license to go kill Trump voters because I'm sensitive to the fact that some of them tried to kill me. That was also wildly irresponsible for the vice president of the United States to be saying. I mean, look, this whole administration is responding with a shitposting attitude instead of like leaders respond. They are so consumed by meme culture that it is blinding them to what any administration of either party would see as responsible governance in a moment like this. And I do worry that that's going to lead to more acts of violence. I do think once the details come out, there's a decent chance what we saw in Portland is because of the same trigger-happy attitude this administration is conveying from the president's bully pulpit. And this spells tragedy in the weeks and months to come. Unfortunately, again, unless we go back to those checks, whether it's the Congress or the people, the administration needs to hear very loudly that this is unacceptable.
Let me ask you this, Miles. You were in the agency. Do you have any way to find out how long the shooter of the woman in Minneapolis had been on the force?
We know that. That's come out.
It's
Do we know?
No, it's come out. He's I was reading it this morning, and I think he started in 2006. He's been
around.
He's been around, yes. And his
Wow.
name is revealed to be Jonathan Ross. And so that part is it's not a new agent. But
whether you're a lifelong agent though, or whether you're a new agent, it's very significant when the president of the United States, month after month, comes out and tells you the gloves are off, the gloves are off, the gloves are off. That is language that affects how you carry out your job. And I'll give you an older example than that. I mean, 25 years ago this year, when George W. Bush started to tell the United States military, the gloves are off in the war on terror. Now, probably all of us cheered the president on in that regard. Some of us went and served in that administration because we wanted the gloves to come off against terrorists. But that also led to excesses. It led to people torturing folks in prisons. It led people to be prosecuted for literally taking the gloves off in ways that violate the law and that violate our democratic norms. It's no surprise that something like that would happen here. If that's the language out of the White House, those frontline officers, they're going to listen.
Okay, so the other thing we learned after our show yesterday, I mean, really quite soon after, is that the FBI is now just taking complete control of this investigation. They're literally pushing Minnesota state investigators out. They're not allowing them to access files and evidence. And Minnesota Governor Tim Walz says it feels very, very difficult to get a fair outcome in this. So what would your advice to them be, Miles, knowing what you know from the inside?
Well, this is very unorthodox. I mean, normally when something like this happens, the FBI would show some level of deference and cooperation with state and local authorities. In fact, that's sort of the default position is let's collaborate with state and local authorities on the investigation. So it's already unusual from the start that this investigation has been treated this way. And I would go as far as to say it's already been politically hijacked and tainted by that decision. Now, it's still possible for the FBI to run an independent investigation, but I will say it's very likely that now in the eyes of the public, because of the early decisions they've made in this case, from the president down to the vice president, down to the attorney general, down to the FBI director, that they have tainted their own case by taking these early stands, by communicating the way that they've communicated about the aggressor, about the victim, and about this overall case. So even if they try to reverse it at this point, a lot of that damage has already been done. But what I'll say in addition to that is that there is no statute of limitations on murder. And so if the FBI decides not to bring a case here, if the Justice Department decides not to bring charges, that doesn't mean the story is over. Now, I'll add a big asterisk to this. I'd be very shocked if Jonathan Ross leaves this Trump administration without a presidential pardon, because the White House has so tied themselves to what this officer did that I would suspect that's what Donald Trump would do. Is that going to shield Jonathan Ross from accountability indefinitely? It will not. There are state laws at play here. There are other potential civil penalties. But again, this administration has already started to double down on the narrative it thinks is true before all the facts have come in. And you can expect that's going to lead this White House to continue to meddle in this case in the years to come.
Before we move on from this, I just want to ask, I mean, I know you wrote this week that you still know people at ICE, and you wrote that the agency is filled with law-abiding Americans who do more than just immigration work, who want to help protect the nation. So what are you hearing from them without outing anybody? What are you hearing? Is there a line too far for some of those employees?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these people are frantically searching for jobs, and they have found that immigration and customs enforcement on their resume has been a huge hindrance in moving on. They want to get out of this agency because it's now been so tainted by what the president and his team are doing that even people who are working in the many different divisions of ICE that don't actually have anything to do with deporting illegal immigrants are now worried that their careers have been destroyed by these excesses. And they're probably right about that, unfortunately. You know, ICE does a lot of good things. It keeps child predators off the street. It prevents terrorists, actual terrorists, from getting into the United States, controls the flow of weapons of mass destruction to keep bad things out of the country, stops cyber attacks, takes down transnational criminal organizations. A lot of good things that we want that agency to do. But it's been hijacked for political purposes from the top down. And the people who work there see that, and a lot of them are trying to get out of there. Now, that cuts both ways. I want those folks to be able to leave if they don't believe in good conscience that they can stay. But I also worry about a hollowing out of people of conscience inside ICE and a doubling down of ideologically motivated officers, agents, and support personnel, which I think is what we're likely to see before the end of the Trump administration.
No doubt about it. No, I think that's exactly right. When the good people leave, who they're replaced by can be a bigger problem for sure.
Do you want to move on to Venezuela?
You know,
yeah, let's do good news, guys. Let's do good news, you know?
Yeah. So, yeah, well, look, it was snowing on Rogers Pass. That's pretty good news, isn't it?
We need snow.
Yeah, we do need moisture. It's all good.
And that's it, folks. That's what you can take to the bank. There's snow on Rogers Pass.
We're here to make people feel better. You know, that's a fact.
All right, let's talk about Venezuela. It seems some Republican senators found their voice this week. You want to say anything about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, I had a visit with one of the senators on the Democratic side about the Venezuelan attack right after it happened. And he said, you know what, we're going to put an authorization to use the military force, otherwise called an AUMF, on the Senate floor. And we're going to vote on it. We're also going to vote on one for Greenland. They're going to vote on a bunch of them. Well, the one they did for Venezuela actually passed. They got a few deflections, as you pointed out, Miles, and it actually passed. And which I think is a very good sign, because it shows that Congress might be starting to become a branch of government holds the other branches accountable. But I will tell you this: I think the proof in this is that if it stops the president from doing anything, I think that he will continue to do whatever the hell he wants in Venezuela, and then we'll see what Congress does about that. Because the fact is Congress, who is supposed to authorize the use of military force, has said not in Venezuela, and we'll see if he puts boots on the ground. We'll see what he does there.
Mm-hmm. Well, and look, there's another aspect to this, which you would know better than me, Senator, which is the mere act of taking the vote and getting a few of those Republicans to come out of the woods makes it a little bit easier for the next two or three who are on the fence to join them. They need to see those points on the board. They need to see Susan Collins and Josh Hawley and others stick their necks out there to say, well, okay, I got it. Now it's not as risky for me to stick my neck out there. Now, I'm not saying there's 20 more Republicans willing to join, but there are potentially a veto-proof majority that could emerge here as this process starts. And Greenland is going to be a crucial test case. If they bring an AUMF on Greenland, here's the thing: you will get more Republican votes than you did on a resolution on Venezuela. There's not a lot of love lost for Nicolas Maduro, a lot of drug cartel activity down there, a lot of bad things. Nicolas Maduro, very bad dude. Greenland, NATO ally. You will see more Republicans join that AUMF, mark my words, and that will provide, I don't want to say quite a firewall, but something close to it to show the president his powers are not unlimited, at least in Congress. Now, that doesn't mean, Senator, to your point, that Donald Trump still won't go exercise the use of military force in these places. He's already drawn a line in the sand on Truth Social and saying he doesn't believe the War Powers Act is a thing. But fortunately, there is a third branch of government, and the Article 3 courts will likely have to take that up as a case if Donald Trump violates one of those AUMF red lines.
Let's play, because Mark in our Substack chat is talking about this clip, and I have a little clip of it. And also Ellie says it's always snowing on Rogers Pass. So we'll just go. But let's play what Senator Tillis said this week on the floor.
Despite its small military, Denmark has deployed forces to some of the most dangerous kinetic combat zones, particularly Helmand Province, fighting alongside UK units. At the height of the insurgency, Danish forces accepted frontline combat roles. Some lost their lives as a result of it. Not low-risk, symbolic missions. For a small democracy, sustaining this level of risk over more than a decade reflects a serious commitment to NATO and a serious commitment to the safety and security of the United States. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that I can have that specific language and the list of NATO.
Okay, so that actually wasn't the clip I hoped for. I played the wrong one.
It's a good clip, though.
It's a good clip, though. But he did say that what were his words exactly? He said
what he said was that Denmark's had our back. We damn well better not shit on them. That's what he said.
Well, basically, yeah. But he said he's sick of stupid or something along those lines.
Yeah,
he doesn't like idiots. Yeah.
I mean, here's the deal with Thom Tillis. Thom Tillis is a good guy, and he is a good guy. There's a lot of Thom Tillises in the United States Senate if they just would stand up and speak. Tom's doing it because he's not running again, and he he did it on the big beautiful bill, and he's doing it on this stuff. He's applying a level of common sense that does exist in the United States Senate on the Republican side of the aisle, and it's just about utilizing that common sense and speaking up. And he had a very direct statement for Stephen Miller, and quite frankly, that's the kind of stuff that needs to be done. There needs to be accountability by the legislative branch, by Congress, on both branches, both the administration and the judicial. And I applaud the effort.
All right, there are two more things I want to ask you about Greenland, and I'll kind of try to lump them. I know you're under time constraint, Miles, so you let us know when you need to leave. But two things. Heather Cox Richardson first put this on our radar because, I mean, goodness, on Wednesday we had that ICE shooting in Minneapolis, and that took all of the news oxygen. But PBS NewsHour reporting that day was that the Trump administration officials told lawmakers that they're actually going to put money from the seizure of Venezuelan oil into bank accounts understood to be similar to offshore accounts. And it's coming as we're hearing the president saying that he will control the money made from Venezuelan oil.
It's not going into the U.S. Treasury. It's not going to be used for paying down the debt. It's not going to be used for giving farmers subsidies. It's not going to be used for anything. It's going to be put in an offshore account. It smacks, and I'd love to hear your opinion, Miles, and sorry, Maritza. It smacks of corruption.
I think there is, for as much of this we've seen, there is so much more of it we haven't seen. You know, when you see 3 or 4 ants crawling on your counter in your house and you say, oh shit, that means there are 4,000 of them somewhere. That is what's happening in this administration. From the early months when Donald Trump was putting out open solicitations for free jumbo jets that would then go to him as president and to his presidential library, which he got from Qatar, all the way to what he's trying to do with Venezuelan oil. This administration, this president from the beginning has been trying to monetize his return to office. We're seeing the ants on the table. There has not been the investigation yet to show us what's under the table, what's under the counter. And I think there is a whole hell of a lot here. And I absolutely worry about Donald Trump being the man managing a country like Venezuela, because we all know that in the foreign sphere, it's a lot easier for a president to try to get away with things that are outside the view of the American people and the American press, using covert authorities, using clandestine military action, using as we saw at the end of his first term, allies in the region to engage in acts of corruption. Ask Rudy Giuliani, ask Lev Parnas, ask all of these people who advised Donald Trump privately on public official matters of state, and were putting the wheels in motion and actions they could take for him in places like Ukraine. Donald Trump regrets that he didn't do that sooner. He regrets that he didn't have a shadow cabinet of advisors, because for the first 2 years of his administration, he had shitheads like Miles Taylor and John Kelly and Jim Mattis and Rex Tillerson and H.R. McMaster and John Bolton and these other people who kept saying to him, no, Mr. President, no, Mr. President, no, Mr. President, that's not legal. He has changed that this time. And what you are not seeing is who those people are, what they're doing, and what other actions they are taking on. So I think that story, again, probably just the tip of the iceberg here, but it's what I worry about a great deal with this administration. They are a walking radioactive violation of the Emoluments Clause.
Okay, so I want to ask you about this Fiona Hill testimony, and wondering what you remember about that, because there's this 2019 testimony that's resurfaced in a big way this week. Fiona Hill, of course, was an advisor to President Trump on Russia and Europe in the first term. And she basically said that Moscow's then ambassador to the US hinted that Russia would allow the United States to do basically whatever it wanted in Venezuela, as long as the US turned a blind eye to them in Europe and Ukraine. What do you know about that? Do you remember that?
Yeah, all I remember about that is, and true story here, there were hush-hush meetings happening at the White House that I knew were on a sensitive national security issue. And I was tipped off that it was an issue that some of us should be in the room discussing, but we were kept out. And I found out that the people who were being kept out were people who were suspected of being potential naysayers, the sort of law-abiding types that were still in the administration. And I asked one Trump official, what are they talking about? And he said, something that's really effing stupid. And I found out from another that it was meetings about Venezuela and going into Venezuela. Now, I don't know where the obsession with Venezuela initiated with the president, but what I do know is that at least initially, there were people he didn't want in the room. There were cabinet secretaries he didn't want in the conversation because he didn't want the people who said no constraining his options. Now, ultimately, word gets out. I mean, just like I was hearing about some of these meetings, and more people got into those conversations. And Donald Trump, of course, didn't invade Venezuela in the first term. Some of those cooler heads did prevail. But Greenland is another example of that. I mean, Donald Trump has been talking about Greenland since his first year in office, since my first year serving in his administration. And I had to have been at least one of the first people that he brought it up to when, after we spent money on Puerto Rico hurricane recovery, he blurted out in a conversation, I want to get rid of that place. He said Puerto Rico was dirty, the island was poor, and the people didn't support him politically. And so he pitched us this, what felt like a wacky, impulsive idea. He pitched the idea of swapping it for another country, for another island, for Greenland. And I remember walking away from those conversations with acting DHS Secretary Elaine Duke and thinking, well, this was sort of insane, but this wasn't a presidential directive. So no, we're not going to look into how to, in his words, divest ourselves of Puerto Rico. Why? Because 3.5 million American citizens live in Puerto Rico. It's not just some territory that we own and we could trade like poker chips. It is our fellow Americans. We can't just give them to other people in a swap. But that wasn't the last time. Because over the months that followed, we heard repeatedly from Donald Trump that he wanted us to look into doing this swap. He wanted to get Greenland. He wanted to get rid of the dirty Puerto Ricans. That was something that I felt like needed to be on my short list of things to disclose when I came forward publicly, because I worried that even though it didn't happen in a first term, in a second term, Donald Trump would make sure all of us naysayers were gone. And he would have sycophants who would want to help him, to enable him to go seize NATO territory. And that could trigger the downfall of the Western world order. And I'll just say very quickly, I think a lot of listeners know this, but the same mechanism in NATO, Article 5, that led all of the countries in the Western world to come to our defense after 9/11, Article 5 of NATO, would be triggered if we set a hostile foot on Greenland soil to try to take that territory. It would be the fastest way to destroy the NATO alliance because it would automatically turn all of our best friends into our enemies. That goes far beyond a sleepy little island of 20 or 30,000 people. That upends geopolitics for a century. And that's why it is incandescently stupid. It was stupid in 2017 when he said it. It was stupid in 2018. It was stupid in 2019 when he canceled a visit to Denmark over the issue and he started griping about Greenland publicly. And it's even more stupid now. But this is another issue where the president merely talking about it has already done the damage. Our best friends are now planning on a future without America very openly because this has gotten as far as it's gotten. That's damage that will take years and years itself to repair.
And as you said, I think in one of your articles, the joke is the tell. When they say, oh, he's just joking around, he follows through if he gets enough support.
He does. And name the issue. Locking up my political enemies, sending troops into U.S. cities, taking over countries like Greenland. These all start as things that Donald Trump and his allies say, he's just joking. He's just joking. He's not going to send in troops somewhere. He's not going to investigate his enemies. In 2020, him joking about not accepting the results of the election, they all go out and defend him. And then he makes them look like fools because he shows that it's not a joke. It's always a trial balloon. It's the best thing you can look for if you want a secret way to decode Donald Trump. Find his jokes and realize his jokes are trial balloons, and you can prepare for the future.
2028, third term. That's what I think of.
He's trying to find a way. I have no doubt. You know, I went back recently to my notes for this book I wrote about the second Trump administration. I tried to paint a portrait of what would happen in a second Trump administration because I felt like people needed to know. And I talked to 100 of my former colleagues from the first Trump administration, from the cabinet level on down, from the John Boltons down to the staff assistants that sat outside the Oval Office. And I asked them one simple question. What did Donald Trump want to do in a first term that he will try to do in a second? And I went back to a lot of those interview notes. And I will tell you, despite all of the very chilling forecasts that people gave me, even those folks who knew Donald Trump and who he really was, a lot of them, when I went back and looked at those notes, said, I still don't think he's going to run for a second term. I still don't think he's going to run for a second term. Even after all that time, they were still fooled by the man. We cannot let that happen again. Donald Trump absolutely means what he says. He intends to pursue a third term in office. He is looking at the constitutional loopholes that could allow it to happen. There is debate about the possibility of Donald Trump being able to run legitimately as the vice presidential nominee. It's something that one of his idols, Vladimir Putin, did similarly in Russia. And I suspect that's the prevailing scenario Donald Trump is looking at right now. But even absent that, Donald Trump has personally flirted with the idea of pressing Republicans to name him as the Speaker of the House. You, of course, don't have to be an elected member of the House to be named Speaker of the House. This is one of their backup plans. He wants to remain in government. Why? Because he has learned that that is his best get out of jail free card. Literally. And he will not want to give up public office before he dies. So it is not a joke. It never was a joke. It isn't a joke. He's actively considering how he can remain in public life beyond this term.
And before I let you go, the New York Times published some very interesting sound bites this week. And one quote specifically, I wanted to get your take about this. Asked by the New York Times if he thinks there are limits to his powers, he said, quote, "One thing, my own morality, my own mind, it's the only thing that can stop me." Is that what the forefathers wanted?
It's the thing that they feared the most. It's the thing that they escaped from. It's the thing that they gave their lives to prevent. And it's what Donald Trump is. He's the manifestation of all of that. And that's not a one-off. These are never slips of the tongue. I wrote a piece today on our site on defiance.news if folks want to read it, and referenced other quotes that Donald Trump gave along these lines. Him saying that when you're president of the United States, the authority is total. Him saying he's got the power to terminate parts of the U.S. Constitution. But most importantly, what the people around him said. And I did a back of the envelope assessment that I should have done 4 years ago this morning to say, you know, how many people on Donald Trump's original national security team, his core national security cabinet, the statutory National Security Council, how many of them came away from their jobs thinking that the president had authoritarian tendencies? And I went through the full list And the answer of the 31 or 32 people who held those roles on the National Security Council, those cabinet level roles, more than half of them left their jobs saying that Donald Trump was a danger to America. More than half of them, either publicly or to people like me in private. And I went through and I delineated that list and I said who was who. Can you imagine that? Never before in American history has a president's core national security team had half of them leave and say, this man's a danger to the republic. Has never happened before, but Donald Trump it is. And you don't need to hear that message. I don't need to hear that message. John Tester doesn't need to hear that message. Fellow Republicans need to hear that message and say, guys, there are other Republicans who found their consciences in this process. It's never too late to do the right thing.
That's a fact. And I still can't help to think that they know it. What's stopping them is probably fear of him, maybe politically and personally. You know more about that than anybody. Can I ask just one more thing? Because I always said that good policy makes for good politics. And we've seen what he's done with tariffs. We've seen what's happened to the economy. We've seen what he's done with our allies around the world. We've seen what he's done, given billions of dollars to places like Argentina. Over half the public thinks what he did in Venezuela a week ago was not the right thing to be doing. Do you think I think we're going to have another election, Miles?
Yeah, look, we will. And it's actually not going to be Donald Trump who decides if it's free and fair. It's going to be people listening to this conversation. And as insipid as that might sound, it happens to be completely true. Because the best mechanisms at Donald Trump's disposal for trying to rig the 2026 midterms are not ballot stuffing, are not canceling elections. These aren't powers the president has. These also aren't things that are very easy to carry out. Ask the Russians in 2016 how easy they found it to manipulate tabulation of votes. It's real hard because our elections are state-run and locally administered. That makes it really, really tough to flip an election. But you don't have to stuff ballot boxes to throw an election in the United States. There's a tried and true tactic in our 249 years of American history. It's called voter suppression. Ask the Black community how they kept elections out of their hands for decades. Voter suppression. Donald Trump can do that by casting doubt on things like the security of the election, on things like mail-in ballots. In just the past 24 hours, we have seen Donald Trump take to Truth Social and say that he's going to launch a full-fledged nationwide campaign to get rid of mail-in ballots. Now, the president of the United States doesn't have the authority to get rid of mail-in ballots, but he certainly, from his bully pulpit, can decrease confidence in mail-in ballots and, in effect, create voter suppression that affects the outcome of elections in key contested areas. He knows that. Take Maricopa County in Arizona, fourth largest county in the country, a county whose votes often determine which way the state goes writ large. You go change a couple hundred or a couple, thousand votes in Maricopa County by just convincing people to stay home or scaring them about mail-in ballots. You can throw an entire election. That's what we have to worry about. And the reason I say that the people listening are the best bulwark against that is it's going to be us texting our friends and our neighbors and our family members and saying, hey, don't listen to the stuff about mail-in ballots. The state says you can do it. You can do it. Hey, don't pay any attention to the ICE agents and the National Guard agents with guns at the polls. They can't stop you from voting. I'll pick you up and I'll take you to the polls. Everything's going to be okay. It's going to be a door-by-door ground game to make sure this election is free and fair, and we're going to win that ground game. There are so many more of us than there are of them. And I will tell you, it's not very, very motivating if you're a MAGA guy to have the president say, hey, don't worry, I'll pardon you. Go out there, break the law. I know it's a federal crime to engage in voter suppression, but go do it. What is motivating is people like us hearing, hey, they're trying to take our election away from us. Let's make sure they don't. We will win that fight. The 2026 midterms will be a free and fair election.
I am worried about the USPS changes, though.
There's the hope right there.
But there's
baby.
the hope. Sorry.
It isn't snow on Rogers Pass.
It's not snow on Rogers Pass. It's sunshine across America, baby. It's going to happen. This will end. We will end it.
Oh, Miles, we could talk to you for hours, and we're just so grateful that you're willing to come on with us here on Grounded periodically and do this. And we hope we can do it again with you soon because you are just a wealth of knowledge, and I learn so much every time we talk to you.
Well, thank you, my friends. I appreciate your courage, your patriotism, your leadership, all of it. Thank you so much.
You know, what we're going to do, Miles, is next one of these we do with you, it's going to be in your house. It's going to be all three of us together.
Ooh, yeah. We're coming to
I like
DC
that.
here.
I like that. You guys can have the green couch. I'll
Yeah.
be on the swivel chair.
Okay,
Yeah.
we should plan this. That's
Yeah.
a great idea.
I'll just photobomb the whole thing from behind.
Nobody
I
wants
got to
that.
get you one of these hats, Senator. I mean, Maritza, you too. I'm more likely to see you in DC than I am
Yeah.
the senator. He probably stays the hell away from this place. So
No,
I'm going to
yeah,
mail it to your house.
Actually,
I want
Yeah.
mailing addresses for both of you. It's coming your way.
Is it
Okay.
really? So, yeah.
We'll
Okay.
talk about
So
your
we'll
hat in a
talk
minute.
about
You've
that
got
later.
to run.
All right. Thanks, Miles.
Thank you, friends. Talk to you soon.
Okay, man, I always like the time just flies when we have guests like him because he's so smart, and I want to ask him about everything, and we just can't.
Yeah, he's got great history to draw upon, great experiences to draw upon. You know, of being in the room where it happens, and it's good. It's good to get his perspective on all the stuff we talked about today. And like I said, we could do him every day of the week and find more and more information.
Okay, so a couple of clips here. We talked about Venezuela with him, and we're running out of time, but I do want to play you this soundbite. This is from a New York Times interview in the Oval Office, and they were recording audio. Okay, here we
Yep.
go.
Do you think they'll be running Venezuela?
Only time will tell.
Like 3 months, 6 months, a year, longer?
I would say much longer than that.
Much longer. And
We have to rebuild.
move
You have to
forward.
rebuild the country, and we will rebuild it in a very profitable way. We're going to be using oil, and we're going to be taking oil. We're getting oil prices down, and we're going to be giving money to Venezuela, which they desperately need.
What would trigger a decision to send ground troops into Venezuela?
I wouldn't want to tell you that because, you know, I can't give up information like that to a reporter, as good as you may be. I just can't talk about that.
Would you do it if you couldn't get at the oil? Would you do it if...
They're treating us with great respect, as you know. We're getting along very well with the administration that is there right now.
Have you spoken to Delcy Rodriguez? Or
I don't want to comment on that, no. But Marco speaks to her all the time.
What do you hear when I play that for you?
I hear troops on the ground in Venezuela. And as we just talked earlier in this program, there was an author use of military force resolution passed by the Senate that said that was not going to be authorized. I think that I just don't think that he has any sort of respect or appreciation for the Constitution and how it's set up and how we have three branches of government. I think that he wants to run this like a sole owner corporation, and that's what he's doing. And just keep in mind, his corporations in the past have declared bankruptcy with in regular times. I think it was a half a dozen of them that he's had that declared bankruptcy. That means his debtors didn't get paid. That means the American taxpayer would not get the advantages of all this. I just think that it's incredibly challenging situation in Venezuela because I think they went in, military did a hell of a job, no doubt about that. Maduro's a bad guy, hell of a job. But now what happens? And I think that's why he doesn't have a time frame, because he doesn't know what they're going to do. And I think the possibility for troops on the ground in Venezuela, I think, are very, very high. And I hope it never happens. I hope I'm wrong. And I hope it works out. And I hope it becomes a working democracy again. But hope doesn't get you where you got to be. And I think that it's interesting. But that's what worries me, is that they don't know what they're doing.
Well,
And they didn't
have-
pre-think this at all.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go to Greenland because I really wanted to ask Miles about this, but we ran out of time. But take a look at this. This was sent to me in this group chat I have with some former team members from my last job. And Reuters is reporting that the Trump administration is mulling over this idea to send individual payments to Greenlanders to convince them to secede from Denmark and join the U.S. And it says that, quote, while the exact dollar figure and logistics of any payment are unclear, U.S. officials, including White House aides, have discussed figures ranging from $10,000 to $100,000 per person, said two of the sources. What now?
Yeah, I mean, look, does it sound crazy? It is crazy. And
How are the American people going to respond to that?
how is the conservative, and I put quotations around conservative, the conservative Republican Party going to say this is a good thing to do? Just like the $40 billion Argentina was a good thing to do, just like the $12 billion to farmers is a good thing to do, just like all the things that have been caused, the problems have been caused by these tariffs. And now we're going to write every individual that lives in Greenland a check for somewhere between 10 and 100 grand to buy them off, which, by the way, speaks volumes about all these programs that he's talking about doing. Farmers are a prime example. Well, they're unhappy with the tariffs, so I'll just buy them off. I'll just buy them off. That's kind of what mobsters do. We'll just buy off the cops. Okay, that's what we'll do. And it lacks any sort of comprehension of reasonableness. Let's just put it that way.
And there was a question in that New York Times interview from the Oval Office. They asked about what happened to these stimulus checks that the president floated because of all the money we're getting from tariffs.
Yeah.
From our own people. And he's like, oh yeah. I mean, probably by the end of the year, but we did just give $1,776 to our troops, and he couldn't answer, wouldn't answer exactly where those payments are. So I can't imagine Americans.
But remember where they came from. You know this.
Well, yes.
They came from housing allowances that were going to the troops anyway. So that's okay.
But I can't imagine that the American people are going to hear some people in Greenland are going to get $100,000 and they're going to be excited about that.
Well, not only that, when they're having a hard time paying their heating
Exactly.
bill, or a hard time paying their rent, or whatever it might be, we're just going to lop off $100K to somebody that we're trying to buy their opinion in Greenland. And I don't think Greenlanders are going to fall for that bullshit either.
Okay, so I think we'll wrap this up, but I did want to just mention what happened in Minnesota this week. You know, it's become another focal point of the nation. And this huge charged conversation that we're seeing across the country. We're seeing, hundreds, if not over 1,000 planned protests this weekend. And I do want to play something for you because former Minnesota Governor Jesse Ventura, at last I heard, had said he's not doing any more political commentary. He's not going to go out there. He's not going to say anything. He's done with all that. Well, then this showed up in my feed yesterday.
Want to know something? I'll give you a quote. We're a third world country now. You want to know why? I'm an expert. I've been to them. I spent 17 months in Southeast Asia while the draft dodger was playing golf. Right? You know how I know we're a third world country? Because in third world countries, they have the military doing their police work in the cities when you walk around. I was in the Philippines the day Ferdinand Marcos declared martial law and went under dictatorship. We went from nobody to a guy with a machine gun on every corner. That's what happens in a dictatorship. In comes the military. That's what's happening here. And people better wake up to it. You want to read something? Then read your history of Germany and start comparing the tactics of what happened in 1930s Germany to what's happening here. Read history. You learn from history. Any time you have the loss of life that needlessly happens, that's tragedy. And what occurred yesterday did not have to happen.
Yeah, just so you know, because when I saw that clip, that is former governor of Minnesota, Jesse Ventura.
Yeah.
He made some points. That's all I want to say. And we might not want to admit it, but it's a fact. And I shouldn't even follow that with anything because that was incredibly powerful. But I just want to say that anytime you get in a situation where life is treated easy come, easy go, it's not a good situation.
Yeah.
Secretary of Homeland Security, well documented. She took her dog to a gravel pit and shot it. And I think she's using that same mentality on human life. I think it's incredibly fucking dangerous.
Somebody wants to hear more F-bombs from you in our chat. So there you go. You did it. You did it. They do want to know if the buying off farmers is working, Senator.
The checks haven't come out. At least they haven't come to this farmer. I was told that they're probably coming in the next quarter, but I don't know that. And I haven't called the local FSA office to figure that out. So, but we will. And as soon as it starts happening, I will absolutely
Let us
you
know. Let us know.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else we need to talk about?
No, I think we covered a lot of. I think we plowed a lot of fields today. So
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot going on. Of course, also with healthcare subsidies, there's more to talk about there. But I think we're just going to put a pin in that, and we will continue to try to stay on top of things the best we can. But it's great to see you in person.
Yeah, thanks. Good to see you too. The
I
hat,
like your hat.
The hat. Well, you should like it. You bought it, so it's a shaka.
Wait. Get it up close there.
Yeah, it's a shaka. So is it? But it's the wrong hand.
Well, that's okay. It's still
But
John
next
Tester
time
has
you
a
buy
permanent
one,
shaka.
it can't be the right hand. It's got to be the left hand. But I don't know if it's a shaka on the left hand.
Oh, I think they're both, right?
I don't know. I'm
I
not
don't
from
know.
Hawaii. I'm gonna have to.
Okay.
I'm gonna have to ask Maisie or Brian.
Yeah,
to
we're
find
gonna
that
maybe
out.
they should come on.
Well, we will, and we'll have a
right.
conversation about shaka.
Yesterday, Senator Tina Smith was our 9th sitting U.S. Senator on the show, so that was pretty cool, and we're grateful for everyone who continues to show up and talk to us. Yes, the shaka thing is a joke, but I think it's great. I think like the Hawaiian people must love you because you have that permanent shaka,
Yeah,
right?
that's correct.
Maybe you should move there.
Is that wishful thinking, or
Well, I mean,
Anyway, let's move on.
Let's
Thank you
move
guys
on.
for joining us, and tally ho.
yeah, and don't forget, we're not quite done yet. Don't forget that there are protests and ways to get involved happening all weekend long. And we just appreciate you so much for being in this community. We want to thank our guest, Miles Taylor. We want to thank all of you for being with us here. We want to thank Pearl Jam for letting us use their music. And you can find us on Instagram, YouTube, Substack, Blue Sky. I don't know if I got it all right, but you can also email us at groundedpcast@gmail.com. Okay. Thank you all.
Ta-ta. Tally ho.